Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Now let's continue what we did yesterday. We're talking about this idea of tzitzit. And tzitzit is a commandment from God. And the Rebbe explained in general what is the idea of commandments from God. And he explained in a short way that the Jewish people are called God's wife. And the reason that we're called God's wife is because we, together with God, can give birth to children. And what's this idea of the Jewish people being a wife and they give birth to children? So basically, the idea of children is someone is giving birth to something that's like you. In other words, bringing life into the world, bringing life into the world. That's the whole idea of children, having children. And the Jewish people also, in addition to the commandment of having physical children, which according to some opinions, that's a commandment for all mankind. According to some opinion, it's a commandment. The seven Noahide commandments are only prohibitions. Those are only listing the prohibitions. But as far as positive goes, they say there's many positive commandments also. It's not exactly the same thing as the commandments of the Jewish people to bring godliness into the world, but it is, yes, to bring blessing and bring order into the world by the non-Jews. In any case, whatever it is, there is the commandment of having children, physical children, but the Jewish people also have another type of ability, and that is to have spiritual children. What is the spiritual children here? The commandments. When a Jew does the commandments in this world, as that brings life into the world. The commandments are, so to speak, the limbs of God, and God puts life into it. So the commandments are sort of like the children of God in this world. And just like the idea of a child, that children are people, right? And people are here in the world to improve the world, to make the world better. So that's what the commandments do. They bring more life and godliness into the world. Now, the difference between life and the opposite of life is an infinite difference. Infinite difference. Some people just wrote to me a couple of letters I got that they had terrible tragedies and they had babies that passed away. And this just shook them up, and one left Judaism because life is an amazing, amazing gift, and we take it for granted. And when life goes away, it leaves us with an incomprehensible emptiness, because the world without God is very empty. The world without life is empty, but we can't ignore the amazing miracle that life is. We can't ignore the amazing kindness and love of God that He gives life in the first place. I mean, if no one was alive, then no one would die. That would be a better world. That we wouldn't have any death, but they wouldn't have any life. So death is a terrible thing, and I'm not trying to explain it. But the fact of the matter is that it does make us realize our helplessness and our mortality. That's in a negative way, but in a positive way, that we're living in God's world. We're not living in our world, and that God's world, that God is creating everything, not us. And the way to make us realize that we're living in God's world, which is the fact, God is really creating everything all the time. God's amazing goodness, we don't see it. And one way we realize we don't see it is when, God forbid, when a tragedy occurs. So it just, how could God do this to me? How could God take this thing from me, like the Holocaust? How could it happen? Which is terrible. It's true. It's terrible. But on the other hand, that should not make us forget that all these people died. They're all created by God, and they're created by God for a long time, right? They were created by God for 10 years, for 15 years, for 50 years. They were created every moment, every second, brand new. They were created, and God just stopped creating them. True, I'm not trying to explain the Holocaust. Don't accuse me of that, because it says that when the Jews have pain, God also has pain. So, I mean, even God can't explain it to Himself, so to speak, right? Because life is unexpectable. It is unexplainable, inexplicable, I guess they say. You can't understand life, and life is even more unexplainable than, God forbid, than death is. Death is God. Life is pure godliness. Death is a product of man. It's man-made. If Adam wouldn't have eaten from the tree, we wouldn't die. People were supposed to live forever. The world is a big miracle. But because there's death, so it doesn't seem like it's God's world. It seems like it's our world. Okay. So that's the idea of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they're supposed to be the ones that bring this life into the world. They bring pure godliness, eternal truth into the world. That's what Jews are supposed to do. Okay, they do. Okay, so here we go. We did this a little bit yesterday, but we'll do it again. Here we go. Let's make this a little bit bigger so it'll be more readable. Oh, it's a little too big, but okay, here we go. But Hamshach, this drawing down life into the world, Talui, it depends on the service of the Jewish people below. She'ain, the Jewish people, they are the ones that draw it down by means of their arousal from below, that God reacts and makes more life into the world by means of doing the commandments. The Jewish people, when they do the commandments below, and why do they do the commandments? Because the king commanded them, Tzivu HaMelech, Kach al yedei zeh, by means of this, Me'orin, they arouse at the root of the Le'ela, that God reacts to what we do, an arousal from above. Shetei Hamshachat, or that there will be a drawing down of the light of God, Bebechinas Sarot. We talked about this before, yesterday, 2 days ago, that God can't give too much life into the world, if so, we wouldn't be able to take it. So life force of God is drawn down into very thin, how do you say, contracted and watered down channels. And that's like hairs that are coming out from the brain, from the head. And that's what keeps the world. That's through these hairs, which that's the commandments, comes down, Bebechinas Chachma, comes down in this level of God's, what's called wisdom, his life force, into the 248 limbs of the king. And those are the commandments. And that's like giving birth to a child. Sheti and Akalim, that the commandments are like limbs of a person. And the number of positive commandments is 248, which according to Judaism corresponds to the 248 limbs of man. Now, what these 248 limbs of man are, I don't know. I have to admit, I don't know. I looked it up and I tried to find it. I don't know. There is a Mishnah in Oelot that says that it corresponds to 248 bones. But generally speaking, in Chassidut, they say that the limbs correspond to like the eyes and the heart, those things don't have bones in them. So I don't know. I don't know what they are. Nevertheless, it says that there's 248 limbs, and that corresponds to the 248 positive commandments. And these are vessels and limbs that there could be spread, there can be, how do you say, flow and be clothed in them, the Chachma Eloah, this upper life force. Chachma is called wisdom, but it's really life. It's called wisdom because it's above understanding. So life is really above understanding. Not everybody has wisdom, you don't know what it means, but everybody's alive and nobody understands what it is. That life is physical life, but there's also what's called spiritual true life, the source of the physical life. And that's drawn down when the Jewish people do the commandments, and they do the commandments kadei in order, that by means of the commandments will be drawn down in a revealed way below. The ideal commandment was the Holy Temple. That revealed godliness in the world. Since the Holy Temple was destroyed, so the whole world is thrown into confusion for the last 2,000 years. There's all sorts of misinterpretations of what God is and where God is and if God is. The mitzvahs will mashpin, so therefore the commandments they give reveal life force into the world. But that's what it means when it says in this third paragraph about the tzitzis, right at the end of our Torah portion that we're reading. You should remember all the commandments of God and do them. What does it mean? That you make the commandments, you create them. You make the commandments to be what's called masculine, male, giving the blessing. Mashpim, that God through the commandments, we arouse that God through the commandments, he becomes the masculine aspect, the giver, the giver of the seed, And that gives revealed chachma, revealed life, and bittul, and surrender, harmony in the world. Liot lamata bittul ayesh, that in the physical world should be surrendered to God. We've talked about this a lot of times, that this whole idea of bittul, or surrender, is the secret of life. That's the secret of life. Right? Everybody has a heart, everybody has lungs, everybody has a liver, pancreas, right? The spleen. I bless everyone that you should never feel your heart or your lungs or your brain or your spleen or your liver. You should never feel those things. When you feel them, then there's something wrong. Something is wrong, right? Even normal people do not feel even their bodies all the time, right? You go to an auto mechanic, he's working on a car and saying, "How's your hand?" It's my hand. What's wrong? Something wrong with my hand, right? They're working with their hands all the time, but they don't feel their hands. They have a job to do. Their hands are surrendered to their will. Same thing as your heart and your lungs. And they're surrendered. When they're surrendered, then everything works properly, works the way it's supposed to be. When a person is egotistical, or when the limbs feel themselves, there's something wrong. Then you got a toothache. Everybody's got teeth. Nobody feels them. Right? So that's the idea of bittul. Bittul means that you're a channel. You feel life. You feel life. Canal. We've spoken about this many times before, but if you've ever seen like a musician, right, a great violinist or a great pianist or whatever, you see these people are just totally devoted to the music. The music just comes through them, right? Everybody applauds them because somehow or other they're just totally surrendered to the music. That's what's called bittul. You're surrendered to something bigger than yourself. So ideally, the biggest thing is God. Is like we say, it's God's world. So to be surrendered to God means that you really become dynamic. You really work properly. You're really healthy. And that's the job of the Jewish people, to make a healthy world. But it is. But, and this is where we got up to yesterday. In the same paragraph, right? The same paragraph that's at the end of this week's Torah portion, it says, you should wear tzitzit, and you should look at the tzitzit to remember all the commandments of God, because we said that's the idea of tzitzit. They're like strands, like the hairs of God, so to speak, coming into the world. That's what all the commandments are. The tzitzit are representative of all the commandments, but it throws in over there a little prohibition, a warning. Lo taturu achrei levavechem. Don't go after, it says, after your eyes and after your heart, asher atem zonim achrayim, that you prostitute yourself afterwards. Zanut, what does it mean? Perish itlavut v'rish pe'esh, that you get excited. You get excited from the world. Avodah zora, like a zona, like a woman that's a zona. Halohata achrei zarim, v'sarim achrei balo. Okay, one of the examples of what of a prostitute is generally a woman that's married, but she strays after other women, after other men. It's forbidden after other women also, but that's a different prohibition. A woman that's married, but she entices other men to be with her. That's called a zona. We just finished the whole thing of sota. Zona means that she's straying. She's how do you say? She's not surrendered to her marriage. Her marriage means not as much to her as having a good time, or whatever psychological or physical, whatever reason she's got over there. But still, that's called zona. A zona is a woman that strays. The same thing with the Jewish people, right? The sin, people do sin. Sin pays. It pays to do sins. If it didn't pay, nobody would do it. If sins didn't feel good, no one would do sins. Right? All the 10 commandments, most of them are prohibitions, right? There are things that some people really like, and if they wouldn't be commanded, they would do it in a second, right? Not to kill, not to steal, not to this, no problem. Worshipping idols. Jews love to worship idols. And if it wasn't for the 10 commandments, and then people would do it. So It says, because naturally people are drawn to quick pleasures. How do you say, I want it all and I want it now? That's nature. That's everybody's like that. Right? They want what they call a quick fix, about the cheap thrills. That's what people like. Everybody likes that. Everybody likes that. But you can teach yourself that it's ridiculous, right? You can teach yourself it's ridiculous. And you see little children, they get excited about such stupid things. And then when they get older, they're excited about big stupid things. Right? Instead of getting excited about a popsicle stick or a marble or something like that, so they get excited about money and all sorts of other bizarre pleasures and drugs and things like that. Right? But it's basically the same type of a thing. They lose their true identity. Their true identity. They lose their true, how do you say, loyalty to being human or to being a Jew. So it says, very easy. God put us in a world that the world is very tempting, very frustrating, very, fickle. That's what the world is. So a person can get into the world and he can say, you can't beat them, let's join them. So they'll go after the world. It says that's the idea of a zona. That's what it says in this paragraph of tzitzit. It says you should wear tzitzit and you should remember all the commandments of God and you should draw godliness into the world and etc. But don't stray after your eyes and your heart, that you prostitute yourself after them. A prostitute is a woman that she is unfaithful to her husband. Shekol hanaot atzarichot la'adam lehanot me'olam hazeh tiano kriya. So what does it mean? Don't go after your heart and after your this. Don't after it. What does it mean to be loyal to your husband? Loyal, in our case, our husband here is God. He's creating us, right? And so we're supposed to be loyal to him. What does it mean to be loyal to him? To lock ourselves up away and be one of the Vestal virgins or something like that? No, that's not what God wants. God definitely does not want that. God wants there to be a world and he wants to enjoy the world. But the enjoyment that we get from the world, it should be secondary. It should be cold. Ki'ilu kafo, as though we're being forced to get pleasure from the world. Right? Oh, nice car you got there. Okay, nice car. I had everybody in my business, they all have, Ferraris. So I had to buy a Ferrari. What are you going to do? I can't come in just a regular, car. Right? I got nice, how many of those shoes? Wow, those shoes must have cost you $4,000. Says, yeah, what can I do? Everybody in the office, they have these. I can't come with just, the shoes I want to wear. I won't get any clients. Okay, if you have to do it, so you do it. So, and they're nice, you enjoy, sure, I enjoy nice shoes. But it's not my essence. My essence is not sunk over there. I think maybe I can here tell you a small, it's this week's Torah portion. I'll mention it again. By me, it's very, very powerful. It's very powerful. It taught me a tremendous lesson. That Moses sent the spies. That's what this week's thing, Shalach. Moses sent the spies into Israel, the scouts, and he told them to come back with a report and tell the people about what type of inhabitants there are there and what type of fruits there are there. And they came back, and that's what they did. They came back and they talked about the fruits and the inhabitants. They just changed the order a little bit, but that's no big deal. They talked about the fruits and then the inhabitants. As soon as they did that, right, afterwards they said, we can't conquer the land. But before they started these negative things, Kalev stood up and he said, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. Don't stop listening. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe asked the question, what was wrong with listening to them? Well, they didn't do anything wrong. They just came back and did what Moses said. He said, no, they changed the order. Moses wanted them to talk about the giants there, how scary the place was first, and afterwards to talk about the fruits. Why? Because if he started off with the giants, so people, the first thing they were thinking about is, we're going into the land of Israel with God. God is commanding us. God is helping us. God took us out of Egypt, right? What do we care if there's big giants? We just defeated all of Egypt. God can defeat the whole world. He just defeated Egypt. Egypt ruled the whole world. They were the most powerful country in the world. And God just defeated them, no problem. We're not afraid of the giants. And then afterwards to talk about the fruits. Very nice. Good. There's fruits. Good. Very good. Okay. Right. But the main thing is we're doing what God wants. And it's good that there's fruits, wonderful, nice, beautiful fruits. But what the spies did, they were very clever. They came and talked about the fruits first. And everybody said, wow, these fruits are really amazing. Shoo, I really want to go in the land of Israel to get some of these fruits. It's such a fertile land. This is really a great place. And they said, but one second, there's these big giants over there. So what did the spies do? They got the people to think about themselves first. First of all, think, wow, I'm going to benefit. I'm going to benefit. And then when they said, but the giants are there, they weren't thinking about God. They were thinking about themselves. Once again, just for a few fruits to go against big giants. No way, I'm not going to do it. So God wanted the Jewish people to get pleasure. He wanted the spies to come back and talk about the fruits. But that was supposed to be number two. It's the same thing we're talking about here. You should be in the world. But the main thing is it's God's world. God creates all these things. God creates me. So my first thing is supposed to be, my first loyalty is supposed to be to my husband, right? And what about all the other pleasures in the world? I do it with coldness. That's not my big interest. What happens when you're like that? If you're like that, if somebody scratches your car, you don't go berserk and take out your road rage and something like that. It's not my car, it's God's car. I don't want somebody to scratch my car. It makes me feel bad. But you get over it quick. It's not that, it's God's world. It's not my world. It's not my car, so to speak. It's God's car. So it says, therefore, that's what it means. Don't be straying after your heart, and don't be prostituting yourselves after your heart. In other words, the main thing becomes the strangers in the street, not her husband. Like it says, Torah kavav malachtan arai. It should be that your Torah learning should be the set thing, and going to work and earning a living, you should also do, but that should be the second. That should be secondary importance. Perish arai derech arai ba'alma. That's it. You're in business. You're doing it to make money. Good. That's not the main thing. That you meet people in your business, you can talk to them about Torah, about God. That's a big thing. That's a main thing. But the actual physical business that you're doing, and you have to be a good businessman, and you have to provide good service to your clients and good products, and you have to be honest, and you have to be this. But nevertheless, it should be all right. It's never going to bring you to cheat, to lie, to become depressed if you lose, to become an egotist if you win. Beli hitlavut, without excitement, without excitement and with fire, the physical world you should be in without excitement, without fire. The chamimus and your heart getting warmed up. When you look at your bank account, you found, oh, there's another zero in my bank account. Wow, then I'm happy. Or if there's 1 0 missing, you're broken, you go crazy. That the world should not be the main thing. The world should be important. But we have to remember it's God's world first. And afterwards, it's my world. Just like a zona, just like a prostitute is forbidden to her husband, like it says, ish ki tista ishto. We just finished learning that. Was it 2 weeks ago? When a man, when he sees his wife is going astray, he finds that she has had relations with someone else. Also, the same thing, a person that's drawn after this strange fire that was not the God, the heavenly olam, but tanugos and the pleasures of people, lo yachal liot bechinat isha. Then you're not going to be a woman. You're not going to be the wife of God. The fire, Eish Hay, you're not, which we had said is, what is the woman, the wife of God? It's a fire of Hay. It's a fire that the last letter Hay of God's name, that you're in fire, you love God and you don't feel God. You're thinking about him all the time. The Kabel Mi Ish that we want to receive from Eish Yud, from the Yud, this level of Chachma of God, God's fire comes down and inspires us. Like it's written in Medrash Rabbah and Kohelet, etc. Okay, here we go. And this it says, Sur Mirab Ase Tov. And this it says, turn from bad and do good. What does it mean, Ase Tov? Tov, that's light. Or, it says that God saw the light that he made on the first day and it was good. Kolomer. If you want your deeds to be shining with the light of God, you have to, first of all, turn away from bad. And do not go after your hearts. So if you see religious people that make a bad impression, or you hear about religious people that are doing things that even normal human beings should not do, but you hear about this. So you should understand that that's the reason why. The reason why is because we're natural. We're human beings. And human beings, first of all, are confronted with the world. And second of all, they're confronted with God. But in order to get to God, you have to think about it and you have to force yourself. You have to control yourself. You have to control yourself and force yourself to not do what I want and to, yes, do what God wants. That's called escafia. And that sometimes is a very, very difficult thing. And it's also very delicate, very, sometimes you have to steal money, no way. But for the sake of my yeshiva, maybe, a little bit of this, for the sake of that. So it's a very terrible, terrible temptation. And God put us in a terrible world. We're an awful world. And there has to be a special commandment. Don't go after your eyes and your heart. Because the nature of every normal human being is they go after their eyes and their heart. And it's very rare a person that follows only his conscience in all situations. He's always asking himself what is right and what is wrong. And that's the thing of what is right and what is wrong, by the way, in the world, it came from the giving of the Torah. Really, it was even before the Torah was given, but the Torah was here before the world. That the reason that people inherently know that it's wrong to kill, it's wrong to steal. They do it, but some way down deep, they know it's not the thing. You don't do it, right? There's all sorts of arguments about where jurisprudence comes from, and that's where it comes from. If it's just from logic, if it's from society, it's from this. But we say that it comes from God, and that God put somehow or other in the very fabric of the world the 7 Noahide commandments. And when God gave the Torah, it became even stronger in the world. So that people know that homosexuality is wrong. They know it's wrong. They know it's wrong, but it feels good and everybody accepts it and etc. But deep down, everyone knows that it's not right. Killing, it's not a good thing, right? Maybe you could get accepted in the mafia and this and you kill people, but still down deep, everybody knows. Good, there's some people that are sick. There's some people that are sick or that society drives us crazy or they had bad educations, right? And they think that that's all there is. But somehow down deep inside, everybody knows that to be good means that you're not a thief. Even though there's some people that are big thieves and there are Jews that are big thieves, right? Yeah, this guy made off. He made off with everybody's money, right? And he was still proud that he was a Jew. He was proud that he was a Jew, and he stole billions of dollars from charity funds and also the Jewish charity funds. He said, how could he do it? Because that's the nature of man. And we have to make a special effort not to follow our hearts. I mean, if you think about it, it's really weird. I mean, it's my heart. It's my heart. Why shouldn't I go after my heart? This is what I feel. Right? It's my heart tells me that this is a good thing to do and I want to do it and it makes me feel good when I do it. And why shouldn't I do it? Because there's a commandment in the Torah that says, don't go after your heart. I should listen to that. It says, yeah, because the commandment in the Torah comes from none other than the God that's creating you. He's creating you. It's not some the God of the Jews that sits up on a mountain or something, Mount Sinai. It's a God that's creating you actively every instant. Your whole being is creating the whole entire world. And he's creating your heart also. And he's creating these impulses in your heart. And he's saying, I'm doing it so that you shouldn't listen. You should defy them. It says that you shouldn't go after your heart. Your heart specifically, your heart is fire. Your heart is alive. And by means of this, if you don't listen to your heart and you are loyal to God, then you'll have proper children. Then we can be, we can arouse this aspect of God to be the male aspect, and that gives life into the world. 1 minute. We'll do this. We'll do this whole thing. Okay. This is a footnote, I think, from the Tzemach Tzedek. That goes up to where to the end. I don't know, where does it go up to? It goes up to some. Okay, let's find it. Here we go. So it says ubechina zu in this level. Oh, here it is. Here it is. And the hainu, namely, oh, it says ubechina zu on this level. It says al tikre morasha ela mo'urasa. It says Torah tivulanu Moshe mo'urasha. It is the inheritance of the Jewish people. It says in the Midrash, don't say mo'urasha, but mu'urasa. Mu'urasa means to be married, to be engaged, to be married. The Torah is a inheritance to us, but it's also our marriage ring. That the Torah is bechinas kala. The Torah becomes here. It says the Torah becomes the bride. Mu'urasa, and it is married to the Jewish people. That they are the male aspect. The Torah is the morasa. That the Jewish people, they bring godliness into the Torah. That's what it says. Kodesh Yisrael Hashem. The Jewish people are holy to God. Reishis tevuatah. That the Jewish people, they are the first produce of God. He reishis umokor Torah. That the Jewish people, they are the source of the Torah. The Jewish people are, so to speak, higher than the Torah. We see this clearly that when the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf, they went against the whole Torah, and nevertheless God forgave them. Why? Because the Jewish people are higher than the Torah. Right? There's some sort of a deeper source, and that's why it says Moses broke the tablets when the Jews were there to save the Jews. It says, Moses said to God, "Where does it say it's forbidden to do idolatry?" And God said, "What do you mean? It's the second of the 10 commandments." And God said, "What 10 commandments?" And Moses said, "What?" He broke the tablets. There's no 10 commandments. So because the Jewish people, because by means of the Jews, the commandments become alive. They become vessels and limbs for the king. That the Jewish people, they become the representative, so to speak, of the king, and they draw godliness down in the world. So sometimes the Jewish people, they're called the sons of God. Sometimes they're called the wife of God. Sometimes they're called the servants of God. There's all these different relationships that the Jews have with God. Because when the Jews have an arousal from below, Talia eteruta comes an arousal from above. In other words, God created the world on his own. But when he created man, which was the last thing in creation, so God said, okay, now I'm changing the rules. I'm not going to do things on my own. I'm not going to do things on my own anymore. Even though God does everything on his own, but he says, no, the fact is, it all depends on you. Jewish people, you do what I want, the world will be a good place. You don't do what I want, what can I say? I'm putting it in your hands. The whole thing depends on when an arousal from below, God reacts with an arousal from above. And that's what it means, that you do them. What does it mean? But it says, asitem atem, that you, it's not that you do them, the commandments, otam, but you atem, that you make. What do you make? It says, listen to this. God says, I treat you as though you made me. So to speak, we're creating God. What does that mean, creating God? What does that mean? That we bring God into the world. That by means of lo tuturu, by means of not straying after our eyes and our hearts, then we unify God. It says, because in these worlds that are separate, listen, if a person goes after his heart, then what he makes the world God. Then the world is the most real. What is God? God is the most real thing there is. That's what God is. The most real, intimate thing that God that exists, that's what God is. If you think that money is the most important thing, then money is your God. Money is your God. You want to do anything for money. That's your God. Right? The Romans and the Greeks had all these different gods of pleasure and God of power and God of success, because they worship these, that's the most real things to them. Right? The most real thing. If you think that the world will decide for you what you do, right? I'm not going to steal. No way I'm not going to steal, right? Come on, I'll take a bribe. I'm not going to take a bribe. What do you think I am? $10,000. Just vote the way we say. Listen, what do you think I am? Some sort of a prostitute? You can buy me out? What about $100,000? Get out. The door is there. Get away. What about $10 million? Okay. That's all of a sudden the world talks to you. Is Misha Choshek Ladavar Hashem, but one who really desires the word of God, and mitavelav, and has how do you say a desire for him, nasa bechinas nukva, then you become God's wife. You become the receiver. You receive pleasure because God receives pleasure from you. You get pleasure from God, and God gets pleasure from you. Right? There's the pleasure from being honest is a much greater pleasure from the pleasure of stealing, even though the pleasure of stealing is more immediate, but it's false. But the pleasure of honesty stays forever. And not only that, that's things that people, right, if somebody happens to know about your honesty, that's things they praise you for. Right? People don't praise you for, whoa, he was a good thief. Whoa, he was the best. This guy was a murderer. He could murder like no one else. I'm so proud of my father. Nobody praises their, right? I don't even think the Nazis praised their grandparents because they were big murderers. Oh, he could murder. Nothing like him. Murder. Everybody was jealous of him, right? How much he used to steal and rape and kill. Teach. This is, I don't know. Maybe there are some sick people that do, but I doubt it. But a person who's honest, when you find out about it, that they write in a book. Oh, he was honest. He refused. Moshiach, which is not the case in the world of unity, by means shehu bechinas isha, that if you become, I'm sorry, I misread this. That by means of controlling yourself, and then you remove the stumbling block of making the world into God, because you get pleasure from this thing that you want in the world, so you become the wife of the world. That means you become a prostitute. You're running after money, so money becomes the masculine, and you become the feminine. You're receiving. And like I said before, money becomes God, which is not the case. If there's unity, the whole world is God's world, then by means that you become the woman, the wife of God, Aish, hey, you become the fire of hey, because after all, we are separate. We don't feel God, and we want to in our soul. We want this unity, we want the truth. Then we become Dachar. Then you become, then God, he becomes the male. Then you also become male, masculine. In other words, you become the master, so to speak, the one that brings God into the world. So you become like the escort of the king into the world. So the Jewish people, therefore, they become the lowest and the highest. The Jewish people, they become the receiver. But because they want to become the receiver, so they bring godliness into the world, they become also the giver. That's what it says, that Achar v'kerem tzartani, that God, it's a sentence in Psalms, that God, you made me the last and the first. We are the last, man is the last thing to be created. And that's man, the first man, Adam Arishon. He was created with the last utterance of God. And by the way, Adam Rishon, the Rebbe says, he includes all of the souls that were going to come after him. And man was created, he was created with the last utterance, Shehu Maimer Naasa Adam, which was the utterance of, let us make man. That's the last thing that God said, the last thing that God created. The last thing that God said was very good. He saw the world and it was very good. This was after Adam ate from the tree and everything. God said the world is good. Which, by the way, that definitely does contradict what all these other religions say, that the world is not good and that we got to get out of here and we got to go to heaven. Judaism says heaven is good, but this world is very good. That if we do what God wants in this world, then there's nothing better than that. That's the essence of godliness. Essence of godliness. And so therefore, man was created with the last utterance. Nevertheless, he's the first. Because the souls of the Jews, they rose up in God's thought. So to speak, they're the reason why God created the world. Like it says, Breshis, Bor Elokim. Why does it say Bereshit? It could have said Reshit. The letter base is extra. So, but God wrote it. It says Beit because there's two things that preceded the world. God created the world for these two things that were there before. What were the two things there? Bereshit, the Jewish people that are called Reshit, and the Torah, which is called Reshit. Vayitem kadoshim lelokechem, and you should be holy to your God. That's the purpose of the Jews. We're supposed to be the teachers of the world, just like the teacher in a class. He's the highest person in the class, but his job is to be totally devoted to his pupils. That's the job of the Jewish people. We're the highest there are, but our job is to be the lowest. We're supposed to be totally devoted to all the pupils, to the world. Hine kodesh bavav. That's what it means. We can be holy to God. That's what it says in the end of this paragraph. It says, "Vayitem kadoshim leLokechem." You will be holy to your God. One second. It says, "You kadoshim leLokechem." We will be holy. It says, look at this. Don't go after your eyes and after your hearts, that you go after them, and you will be holy to God. What does it mean, holy? Holy is with a vav, means drawing down. Vav is a letter that comes down. You will draw godliness, the holiness of God, from the world into this, higher than the world, into the world. By means of our separating ourselves and not being, how do you say, controlled by the world, as we draw godliness into the world, and the world becomes controlled by the Creator. That's like the angels. They say 3 times, holy, 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 till it comes to the God is the God of hosts. We cause the angels to do that. This of holiness, this is like the level of the hairs we said before. This is the idea of what we said, Kedusha. We say in our prayers, Kedusha, Gabi Nazir. It also says the same thing about the Nazir, that the Nazir is, he grows his hair is holy. This is Gadol Pera Sareo Show. Says the Nazir is called holy, that his hairs on his head become holy. Because he's simulating the revelation of God in the world through God's hairs. This is by means of our arousal from below. And that, by the way, the Nazir, he's like super holy. He's a Nazir by virtue of things that he abstains from. He doesn't drink wine. He doesn't defile himself. This is Vayitem Kadosh, and that's what it means. You should be holy. That you, Jewish people, you should be holy. It means that you draw down this level of God's holiness to Elokechem. What does it mean? To the godliness which is in you, your God. Shehu Bechinas Malchuta. This is God's kingship. So we reveal in the world that we are the sons of God, every Jew. And that's by just refraining from being connected to the world and being, connected to God and doing his commandments, so we become God's representatives in the world. Like it says, Sum tasim alecha melech, that we, like it says, you should put on yourselves a king. And this is what's called the lower unity, that they look at the Jewish people and they see the Jewish people, they're the king. They're the representatives of the Creator. But why are they representatives of the Creator? Not because they're greater and higher than anybody else, by virtue of their surrender to God. Bitl yesh, that the world does not rule over them. So they're not interested in success and rulership and things like that. Those things are important. But the main thing is to do what God wants. To the point where there was even the famous story, the Rebbe brought it to some people that they lost a child or they lost a son or whatever in war. And that the Rebbe, first of all, said, we can't understand these things. But the Rebbe brought an interesting story, and that is the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, that an angel came to him and said that because you're serving God with such devotion, as good news, you're going to go to the land of Israel and you're going to be killed sanctifying God's name. And he was tremendously happy. Tremendously happy. He knew that by means of totally doing the opposite of what any normal human being wants to do, but he's doing it only for the Creator of the universe, and he's sure it's for the Creator, as he was happy. Obviously, he was going to accomplish, his death would accomplish something really major in the world, right? And in the end, God said, you're not going to be able to. But he did something, whatever it is that God said, I'm sorry, you've been disqualified. You're going to get second prize, which was writing the whole Shulchan Aruch. He wrote the whole Shulchan Aruch. But somehow or other, his death would have been a tremendous blessing, would have brought tremendous blessing into the world. Okay, these are things which you don't understand. And I'm not trying to encourage someone to jump off a bridge or something and saying, well, my death will also, bring blessing to the world. If God tells you, like he did, then you hear God's voice. First of all, who knows if it's God's voice? I mean, he knew what he was hearing. So go to your local rabbi or your local Chabad rabbi, wherever, and ask him, listen, I just heard God telling me that I should, is this right? Or not? It's probably not. In any case, we see from this that bittul, that giving yourself over to the Creator, even to the point of dying, which is the worst thing in the world. Everyone agrees. But if he's doing it for the Creator somehow or other, that's the whole essence of what life is about. Judaism is based on that. Abraham took his son to sacrifice. That's what's called bittul yesh. Like we bow down in Shemona Esrei. We bow down to God, like the hosts of heaven bow down, which is not the case. The upper unity of God. This is tremendous, total unity with God, mamish, that we really feel that there is, that we're not giving ourselves to God, that all there is God, and that I'm not taking up any place at all. They say that the one pure example of this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was a pure example of this. He's totally united with godliness. And that's why his book, the Zohar, is what's going to bring Mashiach, because eventually we're all going to be totally in harmony with the creator of the universe, because that's the truth. Then the world will be healthy, like a healthy heart or a healthy what. So that's what it means. The tzitzit are like these hairs, and they bring godliness into the world. And then it becomes kadoshim, you will be holy, and I will be your God. That's what how it ends. The commandment of putting on tzitzis. Look, it's the last chapter, the last paragraph in this week's Torah portion. So that I am your Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am your God. Then I will be your God. That will see that God is creating the world, and that the whole world will be filled with this awareness of this truth. And now let's do the Yom Yom. Do the Bar Malchut. The Bar Malchut. 1 second. Here we go.